Chapter 22. Belonging to Jackalboy's group made all the difference in the world. It began that night. Luke didn't have to creep back from the woods by himself, praying nobody noticed. He went with the others as part of the crowd. They strutted down the hall, not even trying to be quiet. "What if someone hears?" Luke ventured. "Who cares?" Jackalboy replied. "Indoctrination's almost over. If there are any teachers around, they'll just think we left early to man our hall monitor posts." They were in a brighter end of the hall now. Jackalboy got a good look at Luke's face and whistled. "You really did get all bloody. Come on, I'll take you to the nurse." Jackalboy led Luke to an unfamiliar office, one he'd only seen once before when he was searching for windows. "My friend walked into the wall coming out of indoctrination," Jackalboy told the woman who answered the door. "Stupid, huh? Can you give him a bandage?" My, you boys, you never look where you're going," the woman fussed. She was old and wrinkled, like the pictures Luke had seen of grandmothers. She puttered around getting antiseptic and gauze and tape. Then she dabbed at Luke's cheek with a wet cloth. "This is an awfully rough abrasion. Which wall did you run into, dear?" Jackalboy saved Luke from having to answer. "Oh, he didn't get bloody from the wall," Jackalboy explained. "He kind of bounced off the wall and fell down. Then he scraped his face on the carpet. Someone might have kicked him by mistake, too." Luke's mother would have listened to an excuse like that and said, "Okay, now, what really happened?" But this woman only nodded and just a little more. The antiseptic stung, and Luke had to bite his lip to keep from crying out. But the woman was quick, and his face was neatly bandaged before he knew it. "Write your name and the time down in the log on your way out," the woman said, "and be more careful the next time, all right?" Jackalboy even wrote Luke's name for him. Up in the room, Jackalboy stretched and yawned and proclaimed, "I don't feel like dealing with the new kid tonight. Let's just leave him alone. Okay, guys? He's getting boring anyway." Luke thought some of his other roommates looked disappointed, but nobody complained. In the morning, Jackalboy said, "You can have breakfast with us. We have our own table. Hall monitor privileges." "But I'm not a hall monitor," Luke said. "The teachers won't notice," Jackalboy said, "and maybe you will be soon." So Luke sat at a table with other boys. For once, he didn't have to force himself to choke down his oatmeal. It practically tasted good. And for the first time, Luke got a good look around the dining hall without feeling like he had to glance quickly and furtively. With clean, white walls and a peaked ceiling, it really wasn't such a bad place. "Can I ask you some questions? Here, I mean," Luke said to Jackalboy. "As long as you're not acting like a real ex-nay," Jackalboy said brusquely, as if he were truly swearing at Luke. But Luke caught the double meaning. It was a brilliant code. "Why is the school like this?" Luke began. "I mean, with no windows and the strange boys and the teachers who don't seem to notice us unless we do something wrong. And even they just say 2 demerits. I don't even know what that means." Jackalboy pushed back his oatmeal and smirked. "Confusing, huh?" he asked mockingly. But he started explaining anyway. Hendrix began as an educational experiment. Back when there were the famines, people had debates over whether the undesirables in society deserved food when so many were starving. They let all the criminals die, but a bunch of bleeding heart, sympathetic types said it was cruel not to feed people with mental illnesses, physical disabilities, that kind of thing. One man stepped forward and offered his family's estate to be 2 schools for troubled kids, Hendrix for boys and Harlow for girls. He said he'd feed them too. You see how well he's doing? Jackalboy made a face at the oatmeal. They built the school without windows because Mr. Hendrix had the idea that kids with agoraphobia, the ones scared of wide open spaces, would be better off not even seeing the outdoors. He thought they'd start longing for what they couldn't see. And he thought having windows would just overstimulate the autistic kids. But he also thought it'd be good to bring in some normal kids, like role models. Luke tried to absorb all of that. He thought about how differently Jackalboy acted when he was explaining something compared with how Jen had always been. Jen was always outraged, indignant over every little injustice. He could just hear her voice rising in disgust. "Can you believe it? Isn't that terrible?" Jackalboy just sounded secretly amused, almost haughty. "Too bad. Poor kids. Who cares?" Luke swallowed another bite of lumpy oatmeal. "And the teachers?" he prompted. "Why aren't they more, involved? Aware? Semi-intelligent?" Jackalboy offered. "Yeah, All the adults. Like the nurse last night didn't seem very smart. And what's her name? In the office, when I was there in the first day, it was like all the students were just a pain to her. Think about it, Jackalboy said. If you were a grown-up and you could get a day job anywhere, would you work here? We got the dregs, man, the real dregs. Luke didn't know anything about grown-up jobs. He'd never thought he'd be able to come out of hiding just to have one. Jackalboy was smirking again. But it serves our purpose, all right, to have teachers who are just one step up from Leckers. We can do just about anything we want. Got it? He looked around at his cohorts, the hall monitors, and soon they were all smirking too. Luke wanted to object to that word, Lecker. Just because someone came from the country, that didn't make him dumb. Did it? Something else bothered Luke too. But I wanted to learn a lot at Hendrix, he said. Math and science and how to speak other languages. I've been here a month and I haven't learned a thing. I don't even know if I'm going to the right classes. I wanted to... He broke off at the last minute because he remembered he couldn't talk about being an ex-nay. He couldn't say that he wanted to learn everything he could to help make third children legal again. Jackalboy was laughing anyway. Oh, right. We're all here to learn, he said, rolling his eyes. This made his friends laugh too. Just get close to me, Jackalboy continued. That's how you learn what you need to know. Forget the classes. And if you're worried about grades, don't you think I know how to fix that too? How do you think we all get on the honor roll? Luke didn't know. He didn't even know what the honor roll was. But when the bell rang for the first class, he left the dining hall with Jackalboy and his gang. He felt safe now, traveling in a pack. All the hall monitors he passed gave him knowing looks, with secret nods that nobody else could have noticed. And when he hesitated between classrooms, Jackalboy was quick to tell him where to go. Chapter 23. Luke didn't go back to his garden by himself anymore, but 2 or 3 times a week, Jackalboy would whisper in his ear, "Tonight," and Luke's heart would jump. Tonight meant, we're going to the woods, we're meeting the girls. Each time he stepped outside, Luke would breathe in deeply, the same way a starving man gobbled down food. But he noticed that most of the others, all so brave and imposing indoors, positively cowered in the open air. They squeezed their eyes shut and took halting steps forward, like condemned men walking to their executions. You don't like the outdoors, do you? Luke asked Trey once as they walked across the lawn to the woods. Trey shook his head slowly, as if moving too quickly might make him throw up. He looked a little green already. It's better in the woods, he said through gritted teeth. At least there we're covered. But... Luke took another deep breath, savoring the smell of newly mowed grass and spring rain. He couldn't understand Trey. Don't you hate being cooped up all the time? Trey gave him a sideline glance. I spent 13 years in the same room. I didn't step foot outside even once until I came here. Oh, Luke said. He suddenly saw that, for a third child, he'd been very lucky. Before the government tore down the woods behind his house and built a neighborhood there instead, he'd spent most of his time outdoors. Except for not going to school, he hadn't lived that differently from his older brothers. He couldn't imagine spending 13 years in the same room. Jen went shopping on fake passes, he told Trey. Her mother took her to playgroups. I thought other third children lived like her. I wouldn't know, Trey said. I wished. He hesitated. I miss my mom. Luke felt sorry for the other boy. How many of his other new friends had basically lived their entire lives in a box? He watched Jackalboy running ahead, then circling back to encourage the others. Jason must have been like Jen, Luke said. He must have gotten out a lot. He's not afraid of anything. No, Trey said, he's not. He says he's overcome all his hiding-related phobias, and he's only been here a few weeks longer than you. He has? Luke asked in surprise. He assumed Jackalboy was a long-timer with years of experience at Hendrix. The rest of us only started last fall, Trey continued, I think. No one talked much before Jason got here. Before he could make sense of that, Luke had to remind himself all over again that Jason was really Jackalboy. It was no wonder that Luke had been confused when he first started at Hendrix. The boys, at least the ones he hung out with now, did go by 3 or 4 different names. They might answer to the first or last part of their fake name at school and the first or last part of their real name out in the woods. That was riskier. A few just went by initials. Trey had explained that his name just meant 3. He wouldn't even tell Jackalboy his real name. They reached the woods, and what Trey had said finally sunk in. "Wait a minute," Luke said. "You mean you weren't all friends before Jason came along? You haven't been meeting in the woods all along?" Trey flashed him a puzzled look. "Just since April," he said. Luke's mind was racing. "The rally was in April," he said. "Yeah," Trey said with a shrug. The girls met them then, and they started the same kind of banter Luke had witnessed the first night. It sounded different to Luke now, not as if they were all worldly inexperienced, but as if they were reading lines in a play, pretending to talk to each other the way normal boys and girls talked. Nina made jokes about how stupid boys were, and Jason made fun of the girls. Luke watched the faces of the ones who were quiet. They all looked scared. "What's this meeting for?" Luke asked suddenly. Jason turned to look at Luke in surprise. "Why, we're planning ways to resist the government over the population law. To follow up the rally." "The rally," Nina echoed wistfully. Luke's heart beat fast. This was what he'd wanted. He'd wanted to do something brave like Jen. It would be like apologizing to her for not going with her, for doubting her. But could he be as brave as Jen? Without dying too? "How?" he demanded. "How are we going to resist?" Nina and Jason looked at each other. "Well, that's what we're deciding," Nina said, just like a boy asking dumb questions. But they didn't decide anything that night. They just joked around some more, made a game of guessing one boy's real name, and headed back to their schools. Jason pulled Luke aside as they stepped back into the school building. "Not everyone's as ready as you are," he said. "You've got to give the others time. As long as they're trembling in their shoes every time they step outside, they'll never make good subservice." Luke was flattered. It made sense. "Okay," he said. Jason playfully punched Luke's arm. "Knew you'd understand. Hey, you ready for finals?" "Finals?" Luke asked. "You know, next week. End of term tests," Jason said. "You pass, you get out of here. You fail, you're stuck for life." Luke stopped short. No," he breathed. Jason laughed. "Scared you, huh? Remember, you stay on my good side. I'll make sure your parents get to look at a brilliant report." "I'm not even going to the right classes," Luke said, panic coursing through his veins, "and I can't ask anyone now. It's been too long." "I'll find out for you," Jason said, laughing again. He was already halfway down the hall. Chapter 24. Jason was as good as his word. The next morning at breakfast, he handed Luke a computer printout that said at the top, "Class schedule for Lee Grant." It had times, room numbers, teachers' names. "Where'd you get this?" Luke asked. "You think your only computer hacker friend is dead?" Jason said. He meant Jen. Luke had a flash of missing her all over again. He could picture her sitting at the computer typing fast. She'd created a chat room for third children with the password of free. She'd connected hundreds of third children, so they weren't just sitting in their little rooms, all alone. She'd hacked into the records of the National Police to make sure none of the kids going to the third child rally were caught before they got to the Capitol. But what good had all her hacking done? "Earth to Lee," Jason was saying, "or whatever your name is, you should know your schedule really doesn't matter. I can change all your grades on the computer anyhow." But after breakfast, Luke determinedly marched off to his first class, listened closely, and took detailed notes. By the end of the hour, he knew something he'd never known before. Prime numbers could be divided only by themselves and 1. In his second class, he boldly grabbed a textbook off the bookshelf and read the poem whose page number the teacher had written on the board. He could even make sense of the fancy language. 2 people were friends, and one of them died, and the other one felt sad. Luke figured he had an unfair advantage understanding that. In science and technology class, the teacher was talking about gasoline motors. Luke could just picture one all grease-covered in Father's tractor, and he knew how they worked. By lunchtime, Luke was ready to brag to Jason, "I am learning something now." He was even confident enough to tease, "Maybe I won't need your help with my grades." "You're going to learn a whole term's worth in just a week?" Jackalboy mocked. "Right. Next week, Friday at 5 o'clock, you'll come begging, 'Please, please, I need help. I'll do anything.'" Luke only set his jaw and pulled out a book to study.